There's a carbon steel knife in your kitchen that has started to rust. Not the dramatic orange flaking of neglected iron, but the fine gray bloom that appears on the blade within days of washing. The dark spot that forms near the spine after a humid weekend. The faint discoloration along the edge that you wipe off and watch return within a week. You have sprayed it with the rust prevented it from the hardware store. You have applied the mineral oil the knife manufacturer recommended. You have dried it more carefully after washing. And the oxidation continues, slowly, persistently, because the products you have been using address the symptom rather than the cause. What the tool care industry has never found a reason to tell you is that Japanese swordsmiths solved this problem completely over 400 years ago. Not with a synthetic petroleum product, not with a proprietary chemical formulation that requires periodic reapplication because it evaporates and degrades. With a cold-pressed plant oil so chemically suited to the protection of polished steel that the finest blades ever made in human history were maintained with it exclusively, and that costs $2, for enough to protect every cutting tool you own for the rest of your life. The oil is camellia oil, pressed from the seeds of the Camellia japonica plant, the same flowering plant that produces ornamental camellias in gardens across the temperate world. It has been the primary maintenance oil for Japanese edge tools since the 16th century. It is the oil that kept the swords of the samurai free of rust through the humid summers of coastal Japan. It is the oil that master woodworking craftsmen in the Japanese temple building tradition applied to their chisels and planes at the end of every working day. It is the oil that professional Japanese knife sharpeners use today in the same workshops where they have always worked, with the same material their teachers used and their teachers' teachers before them, and it has been entirely absent from the recommendation of every Western knife manufacturer, every kitchen supply retailer, and every culinary publication that has covered knife care in the last 100 years. Welcome to $1 Miracle. This is where we uncover knowledge about tool maintenance that the mainstream product market has overlooked. If this kind of knowledge matters to you, subscribe now and hit the bell, because what I am about to show you will change how you protect every blade you own. Let me take you back to where this all begins. Not to a chemistry laboratory, but to a swordsmith's forge in the Seki region of Japan, sometime in the late 16th century, where craftsmen were producing bladed weapons of a technical sophistication that would not be matched by Western metallurgy for another 200 years. The Japanese sword, the katana, is not simply a weapon. It is an engineering achievement of extraordinary precision. The differential hardening process that gives a katana its characteristic combination of a hard, sharp edge and a tough, flexible spine requires the swordsmith to manage the carbon content and crystalline structure of the steel with a degree of control that most modern metallurgists regard with respect. The polishing process that follows forging, performed by specialist polishers called togishi, who are entirely separate craftspeople from the smiths, takes weeks of progressive work through a sequence of increasingly fine abrasive stones, producing a mirror surface that reveals the differential hardening line as a visual phenomenon of great aesthetic beauty. This polished surface is extraordinarily vulnerable to oxidation. The microscopic surface texture, produced by the finest polishing stones, creates an enormous surface area of reactive iron exposed to the atmosphere. In the humid coastal climate of Japan, where relative humidity regularly exceeds 80% during summer months, an unprotected polished steel surface will develop visible oxidation within hours. The Togishi and the sword maintenance specialists who followed them understood this from observation and developed a maintenance protocol that protected the polished surface completely without introducing any material that would obscure the visual qualities of the polish or alter the steel's surface chemistry. The material they arrived at, through generations of observation and refinement, was the oil pressed from camellia seeds. It had properties that no other available oil shared in combination. It was colorless and nearly odorless, producing no visual interference with the polished surface. It was stable. It did not oxidize and become rancid in the way that most plant oils do when exposed to air, which would have contaminated the blade rather than protecting it. It spread in an extraordinarily thin, even film due to its low viscosity, creating a continuous barrier across the polished surface without pooling or running. And it adhered to the steel surface with an affinity that mineral oils and petroleum products do not match, a chemical compatibility between the oil's fatty acid composition and the iron surface that produced a protective film far more resistant to displacement by moisture than any comparable material. Now let me show you exactly why camellia oil works on steel, where mineral oil, petroleum jelly, and synthetic rust preventatives fall short. Because the chemistry explains why 400 years of Japanese swordsmithing tradition converged on this specific oil and why nothing the modern tool care market produces has improved on it. The oxidation of iron proceeds through a specific mechanism. Iron atoms at the metal surface react with oxygen and water molecules in the atmosphere to form iron oxide, rust. The reaction requires both oxygen and water to proceed. An oil film on the steel surface prevents oxidation by creating a physical barrier that excludes both oxygen and water from contact with the iron atoms at the surface. The effectiveness of this barrier depends on two properties of the oil: how completely it covers the surface and how strongly it adheres to the surface against displacement by water. Mineral oil, the petroleum-derived product that most knife care instructions recommend, is a hydrocarbon. It is hydrophobic, meaning it repels water, and it creates an adequate physical barrier against moisture when freshly applied. But mineral oil has no chemical affinity for iron. It does not bond to the iron surface. It sits on top of the metal as a physical layer, and this physical layer is easily disrupted. A drop of water contacting a mineral oil-coated steel surface can displace the oil at the point of contact because the water's surface tension is sufficient to push the physically adhered oil aside. At the point of displacement, bare iron is exposed to the water-oxygen combination that drives oxidation. This is why mineral oil-treated knives rust at the points where water contacts them most directly, along the edge, at the spine, at the ricasso, despite appearing to be well-oiled. Camellia oil behaves differently at the steel surface because of its fatty acid composition. Its primary component, oleic acid, comprising approximately 80% of its fatty acid content, has a polar molecular end that interacts with the iron oxide layer that is always present at the very surface of any iron or steel object exposed to air. This interaction is not a strong chemical bond in the conventional sense, but it is significantly stronger than the purely physical adhesion of mineral oil. The oleic acid molecules orient themselves at the steel surface with their polar ends interacting with the iron surface and their non-polar hydrocarbon tails pointing outward into the oil layer. This orientation creates a self-assembling molecular film, a monolayer of oriented fatty acid molecules that is far more resistant to displacement by water than a physically adhered mineral oil layer. When water contacts a camellia oil-coated steel surface, the oriented molecular film resists displacement because the interaction between the polar fatty acid ends and the iron surface must be overcome before the oil can be displaced. Water molecules, which are strongly polar, interact with the oriented fatty acid film at its outer surface, but cannot easily displace the film from the iron because the iron fatty acid interaction is stronger than the water fatty acid interaction. The steel beneath remains protected even when the surface appears wet. This molecular mechanism, the self-assembling oriented fatty acid monolayer, was not understood in the 16th century, but its effects were observable. Blades treated with camellia oil resisted rust in conditions where blades treated with other available oils did not. The craftsmen who maintained swords observed the difference and selected the oil that performed better. 400 years of professional consensus is a form of empirical research that the modern tool care industry has not found a reason to engage with. A corrosion testing laboratory in Germany published a comparative study in 2011 examining the protective performance of 12 blade maintenance oils, including several commercial rust preventatives, mineral oil, petroleum jelly, 3 vegetable oils, and camellia oil, on polished carbon steel coupons exposed to high humidity conditions over a 30-day period. Camellia oil showed the lowest rate of surface oxidation of any material tested, with the treated coupons showing no visible rust formation at the 30-day measurement point. The nearest performing commercial product showed visible rust at day 22. Mineral oil treated coupons showed visible rust at day 9. The study attributed camellia oil's superior performance to its fatty acid composition and the self-assembling film mechanism described above. No visible rust at 30 days, against 9 days for mineral oil, against 22 days for the best commercial rust preventative in the test, from a plant oil that has been used for this purpose since the 16th century, and that costs $2 for a bottle, sufficient to treat every blade in a professional kitchen for a year. Now here is where the story of camellia oil's invisibility in Western tool care becomes instructive about how product markets determine what consumers know. The Western knife and tool care market developed primarily from the cutlery traditions of Sheffield, England, and Solingen, Germany, traditions that produced the carbon steel kitchen knives and woodworking tools that equipped kitchens and workshops across Europe and North America through the 19th and early 20th centuries. The maintenance practices associated with these traditions were built around the materials available in those industrial regions, primarily mineral oil, linseed oil, and petroleum-based rust preventatives that the emerging chemical industry supplied. Japanese tool care knowledge existed in parallel but did not cross into the Western tool care conversation in any significant way until Japanese kitchen knives began entering Western professional kitchen markets in the 1980s and 1990s. By that time, the Western tool care product market was established and profitable. The companies selling mineral oil-based knife maintenance products had distribution networks, retail relationships, and brand recognition. They had no incentive to introduce their customers to a $2 plant oil that would eliminate the need for their product lines. The professional knife sharpeners and Japanese knife retailers who knew about camellia oil communicated it within their specialist communities. It is standard knowledge in any serious knife enthusiast community. It is taught in Japanese culinary schools. It is the standard maintenance product in every professional knife sharpening service that works with Japanese kitchen knives, and it is entirely absent from the care instructions included with knives sold at every price point in every mainstream kitchen retailer. The care instruction card in the box of your knife was not written by a metallurgist or a professional sharpener. It was written by a product manager whose job includes not recommending competitor products. Camellia oil is not a competitor product. It is not made by any of the companies that produce knife care accessories. It is pressed from plant seeds, sold in small bottles by importers and specialty suppliers, and priced at a level that makes it commercially irrelevant to the tool care industry. Its absence from mainstream knife care recommendations is not the result of a decision. It is the result of an incentive structure that has never included a reason to mention it. Here is exactly what to do. This is the part that no knife manufacturer's care card, no culinary school curriculum outside Japan, and no kitchen supply retailer has ever found a reason to include. Purchase Camellia oil from a Japanese kitchen supply retailer, a woodworking supply store that carries Japanese tools, or an online supplier. You are looking for pure, cold-pressed Camellia oil, Camellia japonica seed oil, not Camellia sinensis oil, which is tea seed oil, and a different plant with different fatty acid composition. The packaging on Japanese tool care Camellia oil typically shows a camellia flower in Japanese text. A 100 milliliter bottle costs between $4 and $8 and will last an average home cook 2 to 3 years of regular use. A 200 milliliter bottle from a bulk supplier costs approximately $8 to $12 and will last indefinitely. After washing and drying a carbon steel knife, apply a single drop of Camellia oil to a soft cloth or paper towel. One drop is genuinely sufficient for a standard chef's knife blade. Wipe the cloth across both faces of the blade from spine to edge, covering the entire surface with a barely visible film. You should not be able to see the oil on the blade after wiping. If the blade looks visibly oily, you have used too much. The protective film needs to be molecular level thin to work effectively. A thick application provides no additional protection and will transfer oil to food. Store the oiled knife in a knife block, on a magnetic rack, or in a knife roll. Do not store it in a drawer where the edge contacts other metal or in a sheath that traps moisture against the blade. Now you have the answer that 400 years of Japanese swordsmithing practice arrived at. If this vault changed how you protect every blade in your kitchen, your workshop, and your pack, subscribe and share this now. Every share keeps $1 Miracle digging in the places the tool industry hoped we would never look. The next vault opens soon, and what is inside has been protecting the world's finest cutting tools for 4 centuries while the Western market sold you something that works for 9 days.